The printer wheezed out the last rule card, and I peeled the lamination film smooth with the edge of my credit card. 7 rules. Not too many to seem paranoid, not too few to matter. I'd gotten it down to a science after 5 years of this. Laminated so they couldn't claim water damage. Placed strategically so they couldn't say they never saw them. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter. New reservation. The Ortiz family. Denver address. Checking in tomorrow for a full week at Cabin 7. 2 adults, 2 teenagers. October tourists were either hardcore hikers or families squeezing in one last trip before ski season. The teenagers probably meant the latter. I loaded my truck with the usual supplies. Toolkit, spare door locks, firewood, and the cards. The drive up to Cabin 7 took 40 minutes when the roads were dry, but October was anyone's guess. My grandfather's watch read 2:47 p.m. as I turned onto the final stretch of dirt road. Still plenty of daylight. Fresh elk tracks crossed the porch, pressed deep into the mud from last night's rain. Big bull, probably 700 pounds from the spread of the hooves. I followed them around to the back where they'd trampled Patricia Henderson's autumn mums. She'd complain about that when she got back from Florida. The kitchen window latch hung loose, metal bent outward. Wind damage, maybe, though we hadn't had anything stronger than a breeze all week. I added it to my mental repair list and shouldered the door open. The wood always swelled this time of year. Inside, I went through my routine. Rule card on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker where the parents would see it first. Another on the hallway table, one in each bedroom on the nightstand. The teenagers would probably use them as coasters, but at least I'd done my part. I restocked the firewood bin, checked the generator, tested the carbon monoxide detector. Standard stuff. The kind of things that actually kept people safe, unlike the last 3 rules on those cards. But you couldn't very well write, "Don't let the thing that lives in these woods into your house," without losing customers. Back on the porch, I nearly missed them. 3 parallel gouges in the railing, cutting through the weather-treated wood down to raw pine. Each line ran about 8 inches long, spaced like fingers but too wide for any hand. Too deliberate for a bear marking territory. Bears scraped. They didn't carve. I crouched down, running my finger along one groove. The edges were clean, not splintered. Whatever made these had sharp edges, not claws. The wood inside looked fresh, maybe 2 days old, 3 at most. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, checking the angle of the light to catch the depth. My grandfather had sketched marks just like these in his journal, always showing up in October before the first real snow. He'd tried to find a pattern. Moon phases, temperature drops, migration schedules. Never could pin it down. The marks just appeared when they appeared, usually right before things got interesting. I left my business card on the kitchen counter with my cell number circled twice in Sharpie. The landline worked most of the time, but cell service was spotty up here. If the Ortiz family needed me, they'd need to be creative. The drive back down the mountain was quieter than usual. No birds, no squirrels chattering, even the wind had died down to nothing. That kind of stillness meant weather coming, or something else. I'd learned not to guess which. My phone buzzed as I pulled into my own driveway. Text from Derek Ortiz asking about hiking trails. I sat in the truck for a minute, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. I could recommend the tourist loops, Beaver Creek, the Lower Meadow Trail. Safe, pretty, boring. Or I could tell him about the real trails, the ones that showed you why people used to worship mountains. I went with middle ground, suggested Crystal Lake Trail, moderate difficulty, great views, added a reminder about afternoon thunderstorms and the temperature dropping 20 degrees after sunset. Didn't mention that the trail passed right by the old mine shaft where hiker Sarah Chen had heard her dead sister calling her name last summer. She'd almost walked right in before her husband grabbed her. Inside my cabin, I heated up leftover chili and pulled out my grandfather's journal. His handwriting got shaky toward the end, but the entry from October 1952 was still clear. He'd been younger than me when he wrote it. Just married, trying to make the rental business work. October 18th, 1952. Tall visitor came to cabin 7 last night. Hodge's family from Texas. Heard knocking at 2 a.m. Man outside, very polite. Said he was lost. Hodges almost opened the door, but remembered the rules. Visitor knew their names, all 4 of them, even the baby they called by a nickname. Stayed until dawn, knocking every few minutes. Found hoof prints in the morning. Not elk. Not anything I can name. The next line was the one that stuck with me, the one that made me double-check my locks even now. It knew our names before we spoke them. I closed the journal and washed my bowl. The Ortiz family would arrive tomorrow, probably around noon if they left Denver after breakfast. They'd laugh at some of the rules, follow most of them, think I was a bit odd but harmless. The teenagers would complain about the Wi-Fi. The parents would love the view, and if they were lucky, that would be all. They'd leave in a week with photos and memories and stories about the quirky mountain man who ran their rental. If they weren't lucky, well, that's what the rules were for. I locked the deadbolt, then the chain. Checked that the windows were latched. My grandfather had been paranoid about entries, doors, windows, even the chimney flue. After what I'd seen 3 winters ago, standing at my back door in a torn park ranger uniform that hadn't been worn since 1978, asking so politely to come in from the cold, I understood why. The motion sensor light clicked on outside. Probably a deer. Usually was. Usually. I turned off the kitchen light and headed to bed, leaving the porch light on. Tomorrow would be a long day. The Ortiz family's SUV pulled up right at noon, just like I'd predicted. Denver plates, luggage carrier on top, bikes on the back, the full suburban adventure package. I stayed on the porch, watching them pile out and stretch. The dad, Derek, moved with that confident energy successful guys always had, already scanning the property like he was evaluating code. His wife Patricia helped a sullen teenage girl from the back seat, while a taller blonde girl emerged from the other side, taking photos with her phone. Joey Bridges. Derek extended his hand, firm grip, direct eye contact. Software engineer, definitely. They always shook hands like they were closing deals. Beautiful place you've got here. Thanks. You must be the Ortiz family. I nodded to the others. Welcome to cabin 7. His wife came forward with a warm smile, the kind that actually reached her eyes. Thank you for accommodating us on short notice. I'm Sarah. This is our daughter Claire. The dark-haired girl barely glanced up from her phone. And Ellie, our exchange student from Germany. Ellie stepped forward with European formality, actually shaking my hand. Thank you for having us, Mr. Bridges. Just Joey's fine. I moved toward their car. Let me help with the bags. Derek waved me off, already popping the trunk. We've got it. Hey, those rule cards you left. Pretty comprehensive. Liability protection? He said it casually, joking, but I caught something in his tone. Testing me, maybe. Seeing if I'd laugh it off. Some of it. I kept my voice level. The mountains killed 3 hikers just this year. Weather turns fast up here. 3? Sarah's nurse instincts kicked in. What happened? Hypothermia for 2 of them. Thought they could handle an afternoon storm in shorts and t-shirts. The 3rd fell off Crystal Ridge trying to get a selfie. I pulled out my keys, unlocking the cabin's front door. The rules might seem excessive, but they're based on experience. Claire finally looked up, teenage skepticism radiating from every pore. Even the one about not answering the door at night? What, do you have mountain serial killers? Claire. Sarah's voice carried that mom warning tone. It's a fair question. I held the door open as they carried in luggage. We get transients sometimes. Hikers who got turned around, people looking for empty cabins to squat in. Most are harmless, but at night, up here, you can't tell the difference until it's too late. Derek set down a suitcase in the living room, already examining the locked windows. Makes sense. Better safe than sorry. Ellie had wandered to the kitchen, reading the laminated card I'd left by the coffee maker. What does this mean? Respect the mountain as you would respect the sea. Smart kid, picking up on the strangest rule. I chose my words carefully. Locals have learned the mountain has moods. Sounds mystical, but it's practical advice. Don't take unnecessary risks, don't ignore warning signs, don't assume you're in control just because you have GPS and Gore-Tex. Like the sea, Ellie nodded slowly. In Germany, we have similar sayings about the Black Forest. Sarah was already checking the locks on the back door, thorough and methodical. Everything seemed secure. The previous guests didn't report any problems. The Millers left 2 days ago. No issues. I didn't mention the bent window latch I'd fixed or the elk tracks that looked almost deliberate in their path across the porch. They spent the next hour settling in while I showed them the generator, the firewood supply, and the emergency radio. Normal stuff. Derek made jokes about the Wi-Fi speed. Claire complained about the cell service. Sarah asked about the nearest hospital. 40 minutes in good weather, I told her, which was why the emergency kit was so well stocked. I was halfway down the mountain when my phone rang. Derek. Hey, quick question. We're hearing these sounds, like howling, but... He paused. They sound almost human. October. Right on schedule. Elk. Rutting season started last week. The bulls make some pretty weird calls trying to attract mates. Elk. His relief was obvious. Of course, city boy mistake. Happens all the time. They can sound eerily human, especially when the sound bounces off the canyon walls. Thanks, Joey. Sorry to bother. A sound in the background cut him off. Long, mournful, definitely organic, but wrong somehow. Even through the phone, it made my skin prickle. That's it, Derek said. That's what we're hearing. I'll come take a look. I was already turning the truck around. Be there in 20. The family stood clustered on the porch when I arrived, Sarah's arm around Claire, Ellie recording video on her phone. The forest had gone quiet, that unnatural stillness that meant something had spooked the small animals. It stopped right before you got here, Patricia said. Derek pointed toward the tree line. Came from that direction, lasted maybe 30 seconds each time. I walked the porch perimeter checking for signs. Nothing at first, then I saw them. 3 parallel scratches on the pine tree beside their porch, right at eye level. Fresh enough that sap still beaded in the grooves. My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. Probably a bear. The lie came easily after years of practice. They mark territory sometimes, especially if they smell food. Claire leaned in for a closer look. Those don't look like claw marks. She was right. Too clean, too precise, too intentional, but saying that wouldn't help anyone sleep tonight. Bears' claws can leave surprising patterns depending on the angle. I touched the marks, measuring with my fingers. Same spacing as the ones on the porch railing, same depth. I'll add some deterrent spray around the cabin tomorrow. Should keep them away. We saw eyes, Claire said suddenly. During our hike, something was watching us. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. We saw reflections, honey. Could have been anything. They followed us. Claire's voice was steady, certain. When we moved, they moved. Ellie nodded agreement. I saw them too. Yellow, like a cat, but higher up. Too high for a mountain lion. Every instinct screamed at me to tell them more, to warn them properly. But direct truth had backfired before. The Chens had left immediately after I'd been too honest, and they'd broken down on the mountain road at dusk. Sometimes staying in a protected cabin was safer than fleeing in panic. Lots of wildlife up here. I pulled out my phone, making a show of checking the time. Listen, you've got my cell number, right? Not just the landline? Derek nodded. Programmed it in. Good. Cell service is spotty, but texts usually get through eventually. And remember, Stay inside after dark, Sarah finished. We will. I gave them the emergency flashlight from my truck and reminded them about the generator's quirks. The marks on the door seemed to pulse in my peripheral vision, but I didn't look at them again. The drive down was slower this time. I kept checking the mirrors, watching for movement in the trees. At the turnoff to the old family cemetery, I made a decision and pulled over. The cemetery hadn't been used since 1943, just 12 graves surrounded by a rusted iron fence. My great-grandfather's stone stood in the back corner, the inscription barely legible after decades of weather, but the marks above his name remained sharp. 3 parallel lines cut deep into the granite. My father had shown them to me when I was 15, said they'd appeared the night after the burial. No explanation, no theory, just another mystery to add to the collection. I traced them with my finger, feeling the impossible precision of the cuts. Warning or claim, protection or possession? My phone buzzed. Sarah. The doors, do they lock properly? Some of these old cabins have settling issues. I texted back. All locks replaced last year. Deadbolts are solid. Windows too. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, good to know, thank you. She was worried but trying not to show it. Smart woman. The worried ones usually listen to the rules better. The sun was already dropping behind the western peaks, painting everything orange and red. In 2 hours, it would be full dark. The Ortiz family would be inside, doors locked, probably making dinner and trying to treat this like a normal vacation. I hoped they'd follow the rules. All of them, especially Rule 4. The marks on my great-grandfather's headstone caught the last light of day, throwing shadows that looked almost like writing. But that was impossible. Stone didn't change. Marks carved in 1943 couldn't form new patterns. Could they? I got back in the truck and headed home, leaving the dead to their secrets and hoping the living would keep theirs locked away until morning. I jerked awake to my phone buzzing against the nightstand, the screen showing 2:03 a.m. Derek Ortiz. My stomach dropped as I grabbed it. Joey? His voice came out in a harsh whisper. Someone's knocking on our door. The words hit like cold water. I sat up, already reaching for my jeans. Don't answer it. We weren't going to, but... A sound in the background. 3 measured knocks, perfectly spaced. Jesus, there it is again. Where is everyone? I wedged the phone between my shoulder and ear while pulling on my boots. Back bedroom. Sarah's got the girls. More knocking, louder now. Should I call 911? They're 40 minutes away on a good day. I grabbed my keys and the rifle from above the door, the one with silver bullets I'd never tested. I'm coming up. Stay on the line. My truck fired up on the second try. The headlights cut through the darkness as I took the first curve too fast, tires spitting gravel. It stopped, Derek said. Then after a pause that made my skin crawl, someone's talking. Through the phone, I heard it, a man's voice muffled by the cabin door but clear enough. Hello, I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm lost. I took a wrong turn on the trail. Please, I just need directions back to the parking area. The voice sounded almost right. Almost. But each word came out too precise, like someone reading phonetically from a card. The spacing between sentences was wrong too. Perfectly measured, no natural pauses for breath. Don't say anything, I told Derek, taking another curve hard enough to make the truck lean. Don't even move near the door. Wasn't planning on it. His breathing was quick, scared. Good. Scared people followed rules better. It knows we're here, though. The knocking is right where we're standing. 3 more knocks, patient and rhythmic. Please. The voice outside continued. I can see your lights on. I know someone's home. My phone is dead. I've been walking for hours. Every word still had that mechanical perfection. No emotion, no exhaustion that should come from hours of hiking. Just flat recitation. Derek, can you see him through any windows? Hold on. Shuffling sounds, footsteps. Okay, I'm at the front window looking through the blinds. Christ. What? He's just standing there, not moving at all, like a statue. Describe him. Tall, maybe 6.5 feet. He's wearing hiking gear, but it looks old, like from the 80s or something. Red backpack, torn jacket. A pause. Joey, he's not shivering. It's 30 degrees out there, and he's not even shivering. The speedometer hit 50 on a road meant for 25. His face. Can you see his face? It's in shadow from the porch light. Wait, he's turning. A scream erupted through the phone. Not Derek, higher pitched, Claire. What happened? She looked out her bedroom window. Derek's voice cracked. She saw his face. She won't say what. She just keeps crying. Sarah's voice in the background, sharp with forced calm, telling Claire to look at her. Only at her. The eyes, Derek whispered. She keeps saying the eyes are wrong. 3 more knocks, harder this time. The sound carried through the phone like hammer blows. Get everyone to the back bedroom, I said. The one with the attached bathroom. No windows on the north side. Already moving. Rapid footsteps, doors closing. Ellie, come on, leave your phone. The knocking stopped. In the silence, I could hear my engine roaring, tires squealing around curves. 8 minutes out, maybe 7 if I didn't flip the truck. Is he still there? I asked. I don't know. I'm not looking. Then a new sound. Long, deliberate scratching along the cabin's exterior wall, like fingernails on wood but deeper, carving into the grain. It's moving along the outside, Derek said, following our path to the back room. The scratching continued, tracking them. I heard Sarah herding the girls into the bathroom, her nurse's training keeping her voice steady despite everything. 5 minutes, I said, though it was probably more like 6. Heavy footsteps above them, on the roof. That's not possible, Derek breathed. The roof's too steep. There's no way. The footsteps were slow, measured, not the scrabbling of an animal or the careful navigation of a person on a slanted surface. Just steady, impossible steps directly overhead. It's walking on the roof like it's flat ground, Derek said. The footsteps stopped directly above them. In the silence, I could hear Claire's muffled sobs, Sarah whispering prayers, Ellie speaking rapid German. Then nothing. Complete silence. Is it gone? Derek asked after 30 seconds. Don't move. Don't check. I'm almost there. I skidded into their driveway 3 minutes later, headlights sweeping across the empty porch. No figure, no movement. I grabbed the rifle and a flashlight, scanning the tree line. I'm here, I said into the phone. Stay put. The front door was unmarked except for 3 long scratches in the wood, cutting through the varnish to raw timber. I followed the scratch marks along the side of the cabin, one continuous line at shoulder height, like something had dragged a blade while walking. In the mud beside the cabin, I found them. Footprints, but wrong. The front looked human enough. Toes, ball, arch, but the heel was all wrong, split down the middle with deep, round indentations, like hooves. I followed the tracks around the cabin, 3 complete circles, each one slightly closer to the walls than the last. The final circle was so close that whatever made it would have been brushing against the siding. The tracks led back toward the forest, clear and deep in the mud. I followed them with my flashlight to the tree line, where they simply ended, not like something had jumped or climbed. They just stopped, mid-stride, as if whatever made them had evaporated. I went back and knocked on the cabin door, 3 quick taps. Nothing like the measured knocks from before. It's Joey, I called out. Derek opened the door, his face gray with exhaustion. Behind him, Sarah stood with a kitchen knife, still in defensive position. Claire and Ellie huddled on the couch, Claire's face buried in Sarah's shoulder when she came over. It's gone, I said, setting the rifle by the door. You're safe now. What was it? Sarah asked, her nurse's pragmatism overriding fear. I don't know. The truth, even if incomplete. But it's gone. I stayed until dawn, sitting on their porch with the rifle across my lap. Derek joined me around 4, bringing coffee. The footprints, he said quietly. I saw you looking at them. I sipped the coffee, choosing my words. Could be someone playing a prank. Halloween's coming up. You don't believe that? No. We sat in silence, watching the forest lighten with pre-dawn gray. Birds started calling, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Those tracks, Derek continued, they weren't human, were they? I thought about lying, but he'd already seen too much. The front part was. And the back. Different. He absorbed this, hands wrapped around his mug. Claire said its eyes reflected light, like an animal's, but the face was human. Almost human. Almost. That word kept coming up. Almost human. Almost right. Almost normal. Will it come back? He asked. Maybe. Probably not tonight. These things seem to follow patterns. I caught myself saying things and didn't correct it. You could leave, find another place. Would that be safer? I thought about the Chens, their car found abandoned on the mountain road, doors open, no sign of them. Not necessarily. The sun crested the eastern peaks, painting everything gold and normal. Sarah came out with Claire and Ellie, both girls pale but calm. Thank you, Sarah said simply. I nodded, standing to leave. Keep your phones charged. Call if anything at all seems off. As I drove away, I didn't tell them about the hoof prints, didn't mention how they'd circled the cabin 3 times, like something performing a ritual. Didn't say that my grandfather had sketched the exact same pattern in his journal, labeled simply, The Claiming. They had 6 more nights. I'd watch every one of them. The morning light filtered through my grandfather's study windows, illuminating dust motes that danced above stacks of yellowed newspapers. I'd been at this for 3 hours, working backward through his filing system, a maze of dates and cryptic notations only he'd fully understood. My coffee had gone cold somewhere around 1923. Then I found it, wedged between 2 articles about mining accidents. Peculiar encounter near Pikes Peak, dated October 17, 1887. The paper was brittle enough that I held my breath while unfolding it. Local trapper Josiah Mills reports strange visitation at his cabin last Tuesday evening. A tall gentleman dressed in outdated attire requested shelter from the storm. When Mills, following mountain custom, refused entry to the stranger, the visitor became agitated. Mills discovered peculiar markings upon his door come morning, 3 parallel lines cut deep into the wood. My phone buzzed. Derek. Hey Joey, we're packing up, heading out after lunch. Wait. I set the article aside carefully. Don't leave yet. Can you meet me at the cabin? There's something you need to see. We're kind of eager to get back to civilization. His voice carried that forced lightness people use when they're trying not to admit they're scared. I get it, but leaving might make things worse. Give me 30 minutes. Silence on his end, then Patricia's voice in the background. They discussed in hushed tones before Derek came back. 30 minutes. I grabbed my grandfather's journal and 3 more newspaper clippings, including one from 1902 with a photograph, grainy but clear enough to show 3 marks carved into a settler's wagon. The caption read, Mysterious Vandalism or Indian Warning. The family waited on the porch when I arrived, their SUV already loaded. Claire sat on the steps, knees drawn up, while Ellie stood apart taking pictures of the tree line with her phone. Thanks for waiting. I climbed the steps, noting fresh scratches on the railing I hadn't seen yesterday. I know last night was rough. Rough? Claire looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Something tried to break into our house. But it didn't, I said, settling onto the porch bench. And that's important. Patricia crossed her arms, full nurse mode assessment in her gaze. What aren't you telling us? I opened the journal to the 1887 article, handing it to her. This has been happening for a long time. Same pattern, knocking, requests for entry, marks left behind. She read quickly, professionally, then passed it to Derek. His engineering brain kicked in immediately. These dates, they're all October. Every single one. I flipped through more pages. 1887, 1902, 1921, 1952, 1978. 1978? Patricia interrupted. That's recent. Park ranger named Tom Hendricks went missing after reporting someone in outdated clothing asking for help near the Crater Lake Trail. I pulled out the photocopy. They found his uniform folded neatly at his cabin door 3 days later. Never found him. Ellie had moved closer, reading over Derek's shoulder. The marks, they appear in all these stories. Every time someone refuses entry, I showed them my grandfather's sketches. He spent 40 years documenting this. The marks aren't random, they're a message, or maybe a warning. Warning about what? Derek asked. I chose my words carefully. I think leaving suddenly, like you're running away, might be seen as disrespectful. These mountains were sacred to the Ute people long before settlers arrived. They had protocols, ways of showing respect. Patricia studied me. You think this thing, whatever it is, it's connected to that? Maybe. Or maybe it's older. I turned to Ellie. You mentioned finding a cave yesterday? She nodded, already pulling out her phone. Before the knocking started, Claire and I hiked the Eastern Trail while Derek and Patricia made lunch. I told her not to go in, Claire muttered. But I did anyway. Ellie swiped through photos. Look at this. The image showed a cave wall covered in symbols. Not Native American pictographs. I'd seen plenty of those. These were different. 3 lines intersecting in complex patterns, some forming triangles, others creating shapes that hurt to look at directly. Jesus, Derek breathed. How old are these? Can you send me those? I asked Ellie. She nodded, thumbs flying across her screen. My phone pinged moments later with 12 images. I enlarged one, comparing it to my grandfather's sketch from 1952. Identical, not similar, exactly the same, down to the angle of intersection. Your grandfather saw these? Patricia asked, looking between the phone and journal. He never mentioned finding a cave, but after his encounter in 52, he started drawing these obsessively. Filled 3 notebooks. What encounter? Patricia's voice was sharp. I showed them the October 18th entry, letting them read about the tall visitor who knew the Hodges family's names. Patricia's face went pale when she reached the part about hoof prints. The tracks we saw this morning, Derek said slowly. The ones you said might be a prank, weren't a prank. No point in lying now. Front half human, back half, not. Claire made a sound between a laugh and sob. So we're being stalked by what exactly? I don't know. The admission felt like failure. My family's been here 3 generations and we still don't know. It appears in October, always during the first snow, which is forecast for tonight, by the way. It asks for entry, gets angry when refused, leaves marks, then usually disappears until next year. Usually? Patricia caught the hesitation. Sometimes it stays interested in particular families, follows them, watches. Nope. Claire stood abruptly. We're leaving. Now. That might make it worse, I said quickly. The Hendricks family in 93 packed up and ran after the first night. Their car was found abandoned on the mountain road. Doors open, engine running, no sign of them. That stopped her. She sank back onto the steps. Derek was doing mental calculations. So what do you suggest? Stay for your remaining nights. Don't act afraid. Respectful, but not afraid. Thank the mountain when you leave. I felt ridiculous saying it, but my grandfather's notes were clear on this. And stay together. Whatever this thing is, it seems focused on isolation. It wants people alone. You really believe this? Patricia asked, not skeptical, just direct. 3 winters ago, something knocked on my door at 2 a.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Tom Hendricks in his ranger uniform. Problem was, Hendricks disappeared in 1978. I met each of their eyes. So, yeah, I believe. Silence stretched across the porch. Wind rustled through pines, carrying the smell of coming snow. "We'll stay," Derek finally said. "But we're boarding up the windows." "I'll help," I offered. "And tonight, I'll be watching from my truck. You won't see me, but I'll be there." Patricia nodded slowly. "Those symbols in the cave, what do you think they mean? Communication, maybe? Territory marking?" I gathered up the journal and articles. "I'm going to contact the university, see if their anthropology department has any ideas." Ellie spoke up. "In Germany, we have stories of things that guard forests. They test humans, see if they're worthy of passage." "You think this is a test?" Claire asked. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just territorial." Ellie shrugged. "Either way, running seems like failing." We spent the afternoon securing the cabin. Derek and I boarded the lower windows while Patricia organized supplies in case they needed to barricade themselves in the back bedroom again. Claire and Ellie moved all the beds away from windows, creating a defensive position in the hallway. As sunset approached, I headed to my truck. "Remember, don't answer the door. Don't even acknowledge it if it comes." "And if it tries to break in?" Derek asked. "Then you call me, and we deal with it together." I parked just off the access road, close enough to see the cabin but hidden by trees. The temperature dropped fast once the sun disappeared behind the peaks. By 8 o'clock, my breath fogged the windshield. 10 o'clock. 11. Nothing. Then, at 11:17, movement in the trees. A tall figure emerged from the forest, walking with that too smooth gait I'd seen 3 winters ago. Through my binoculars, I tracked it as it approached the cabin. It stopped at the tree line, maybe 30 feet from the porch. Just standing there, watching. The porch light caught its silhouette, definitely over 7 feet tall. Human-shaped, but wrong in proportion. The head was the worst part. In profile, I could see protrusions from the skull. Antlers or horns, branching up and back like a crown of bone. It stood perfectly still for 3 hours. No shifting weight, no adjusting position, like someone had paused a video. Even through binoculars, I couldn't make out facial features. The face stayed in shadow despite the moonlight. At 2:20 a.m., clouds rolled in from the west, covering the moon. In the 30 seconds of complete darkness, the figure vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. When the clouds passed, the tree line was empty. I waited until dawn, then walked the perimeter. The tracks were there, as I'd expected, but this time, they formed a deliberate pattern. 3 concentric circles around the entire cabin, each one tighter than the last. My grandfather's journal mentioned this exact pattern, sketched in shaking handwriting the night before the creature tried to enter his home. The night before, everything changed. I photographed the tracks, then went to knock on the cabin door. 3 quick taps, our agreed signal. Derek answered, looking haggard. Behind him, the others sat around the kitchen table, nobody even pretending they'd slept. "It was here," I said, "watching, but it didn't approach." "We know," Patricia said quietly. "We could feel it." I showed them the tracks, the 3 circles clear in the morning mud. Nobody asked what it meant. We all knew. It was claiming them. The snow started right at 9, just like the weather service promised. Fat, wet flakes that stuck to everything. The kind that would dump a foot by morning and knock out power lines if we weren't lucky. I sat at the Ortiz family's kitchen table, watching Derek double-check the furniture we'd pushed against the windows. The couch blocked the big picture window. The dining table reinforced the back door. We'd turned their rental into a fortress. Coffee? Sarah held up the pot, steady as always despite the situation. Thanks. I wrapped my hands around the mug, feeling the warmth through ceramic. The girls sat on the floor by the fireplace, Claire showing Ellie something on her phone. Probably anything to avoid thinking about what might come. My grandfather's final journal entry was burned into my memory. I'd read it so many times today that I could recite it. The first snow brings it fully into our world. Not a visitor anymore, but something present, solid, demanding. How long do we wait? Derek asked, settling into the chair across from me. It'll come when it comes, usually between 10 and 2. I checked my watch, 9:47. The snow triggers something. It makes it bolder. Claire looked up from her phone. You've seen it before. Really seen it, not just shadows. Not a question, but I nodded anyway. Once. Last winter. What did it look like? Before I could answer, we heard them. Footsteps in the snow. Slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. Not trying to hide. The opposite, actually. Announcing itself. Everyone froze. The footsteps continued their circuit, each one a muffled crunch in the fresh powder. Sarah moved to the girls, positioning herself between them and the door. Derek stood, hand reaching for the poker by the fireplace. Nobody move, I whispered, though I was already walking to the front window. I peered through a gap between the couch and the frame. The porch light illuminated falling snow, turning everything into a white curtain. Then it stepped into view, 8 feet tall, maybe more. Its body was wrapped in what might have been a Union Army coat once, now rotted to tatters that hung like moss. But the head, God, the head. Massive elk antlers erupted from its skull, 12 points on each side, so heavy they should have snapped its neck. The face below was stretched like someone had grabbed human features and pulled them over a frame too large, eyes set too wide, reflecting the porch light like a coyote's. The mouth was almost normal until it opened, revealing teeth in rows like a shark's. "What do you see?" Derek whispered. I couldn't answer. The creature had stopped directly in front of the door, its head tilted as if listening. Then it raised one hand. Too many knuckles, fingers that bent in ways that made my stomach turn, and knocked 3 times, polite as a neighbor. "Hello?" The voice was beautiful, melodious, like a trained singer's. I apologize for the late hour, but the storm caught me unprepared. "Might I trouble you for shelter?" Nobody breathed. The creature waited, patient as winter itself. "I know you're inside." Still that gorgeous voice, each word perfectly enunciated. Derek Ortiz, software engineer from Denver. Sarah Ortiz, ICU nurse at Denver General. Claire Romero, honor student who hides her grades. Ellie Schneider, exchange student from Munich, writing about American folklore. Claire made a strangled sound. Sarah pulled both girls against her. The creature continued, voice never changing tone. And Joey Bridges, Joseph Michael Bridges, 3rd-generation caretaker, keeper of incomplete rules, reader of old journals. My middle name. Nobody up here knew my middle name. It wasn't on any paperwork, any licenses. Even my father had only used it when I was in serious trouble. "Please," it said. "The snow is so cold." The politeness made it worse somehow, like being stalked by something with perfect manners. Silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then the door exploded inward with a crack like thunder. No, not exploded. The creature had simply pushed, and 100-year-old wood splintered like balsa. The deadbolt held, but barely, the door frame cracking around it. Another push and we'd have nothing between us and it. "Get to the back room," Derek shouted, grabbing the poker. "No!" I stepped forward, surprising myself. "Nobody run." The creature hit the door again. Wood screamed. The deadbolt bent but held. My grandfather's words came back. The mountain has its own will. Sometimes you have to acknowledge what owns the land. I walked to the door, close enough to smell the thing outside. Pine sap and old death and something metallic like copper. Through the cracks in the wood, I could see one eye, larger than it should be, the pupil dilated despite the porch light. We respect the mountain. My voice came out steadier than I felt. We respect its age, its power, its guardianship. The pounding stopped. Through the ruined door, I saw the creature step back, its head tilted again, those impossible antlers catching snow. Listening. "We're temporary," I continued, the words coming from somewhere deeper than thought. "We know that. We're visitors on land that was never ours. We follow the rules. We don't take more than offered. We'll leave in the morning and disturb nothing sacred." The creature stood perfectly still. Snow accumulated on its antlers, on the remains of its uniform, turning it into a statue. Then it raised that wrong-jointed hand and drew 3 lines in the air. The gesture was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. "Acceptable," it said in that beautiful voice. It began walking backward, never turning around. Those reflective eyes stayed locked on mine through the ruined door. 10 feet, 20. At the tree line, it stopped. "The old agreements hold," it said. "For now." Then it stepped backward into the forest and was gone. Not hidden by trees. Gone. Like it had never existed at all. Nobody moved for a full minute. Finally, Sarah lowered herself onto the couch, pulling the girls with her. "What agreements?" "I don't know." I examined the door, split down the middle, but somehow still standing. My grandfather never mentioned agreements. Derek was already moving furniture to barricade the broken door. "Will it come back?" "Not tonight." I helped him shift the bookshelf. "When it makes a decision, it keeps it. That's one thing we've learned." Ellie finally spoke, her accent thicker with stress. "It knew your middle name." "Yeah. How?" "Same way it knew everything else, I guess." I thought about those eyes, too intelligent, too knowing. It's been here longer than any of us. Maybe it just knows things. We spent the rest of the night awake, taking shifts, watching the tree line. The snow kept falling, covering the creature's tracks, erasing evidence of its visit except for the destroyed door. Around 4 a.m., Claire fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder. Ellie dozed in the chair by the dying fire. Derek and I stood by the window, watching dawn creep across the mountains. "The old agreements," he said quietly. "You think there really was some kind of deal? Between the first settlers and that? Maybe. Or maybe between the Ute and whatever came before." I thought about the cave symbols Ellie had photographed, patterns that hurt to look at. "Some things are older than history. But it accepted your words, your acknowledgement. For now." That phrase stuck with me. For now. Like agreements could be renegotiated, like the rules might change. The sun broke through clouds, setting the fresh snow ablaze with light. In a few hours, the Ortiz family would pack up and leave. They'd go back to Denver, back to normal life, and try to process what they'd seen. Maybe they'd convince themselves it was altitude sickness or mass hysteria. People were good at forgetting impossible things. But I'd remember. I'd add tonight to the journal, another entry in my family's catalog of encounters, and I'd think about that phrase, the old agreements, and wonder what exactly my ancestors had promised to keep us safe. Outside, the mountain stood silent under its blanket of new snow, keeping its secrets. Somewhere up there, in caves and forests older than memory, something watched and waited and remembered agreements made in desperate darkness. Tomorrow, new guests would arrive. I'd give them the rules, hope they'd listen, and watch another family struggle with the impossible truth of this place. But tonight, we'd survived. The agreements, whatever they were, held. For now, I helped the Ortiz family load their SUV as the morning sun turned last night's snow into streams of meltwater running off the cabin roof. The broken door we'd barricaded with furniture looked even worse in daylight, splintered wood and bent metal that no amount of explaining could make normal. Insurance should cover it, I said, though we both knew no claim would capture what really happened. Derek secured the last suitcase, then turned to face me. Will it follow us? Back to Denver? The question I'd been dreading. I don't think so. In all the records my family's kept, it's never left the mountain. Whatever it is, it seems tied to this specific place. Seems? Patricia emerged from the cabin with the girls. That's not exactly reassuring. It's the best I can offer. I watched Claire helping Ellie with her backpack, both of them moving like they hadn't slept in days. This thing has boundaries. Rules it follows, just like it expects us to follow ours. Claire approached me, phone in hand. Here. She showed me her number on the screen. When I'm ready, not now, but when I'm ready, I want to know more. About the history, the agreements, all of it. I added her contact, understanding the weight of what she was asking. Some knowledge you couldn't unlearn. Ellie pulled out her phone, swiping through images. The cave photos. I'm sending them all to you. Her fingers moved across the screen with German efficiency. There were sections I didn't photograph, deeper parts. The symbols there were different. Different how? Older, I think. More primitive. Less geometric and more like actual drawings. She met my eyes. Like stories. My phone buzzed repeatedly as her photos arrived. Dozens of them, each showing those impossible patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. They piled into the SUV, Patricia taking the driver's seat. As they pulled away, Derek lowered his window. Thank you. For everything. For being honest when it mattered. I watched their taillights disappear around the first curve, then stood alone in the muddy driveway. The mountain felt different in their absence. Not empty, but expectant, like something waiting for the next move in an ancient game. The hike to Ellie's cave took 40 minutes through melting snow and mud. I'd brought proper equipment this time, headlamp, camera with extra batteries, even rope in case the cave went deeper than expected. The entrance was smaller than I'd imagined, barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. Inside, my headlamp illuminated the symbols Ellie had photographed, but she was right. There was more. Past the geometric patterns, deeper in where the cave widened into a proper chamber, the walls told stories. Pictographs in faded ochre and charcoal showed human figures approaching a massive horned being, not cowering or fleeing, approaching with hands extended, offering objects I couldn't identify. The next panel showed the being accepting these gifts, its own hands, too many fingers even in ancient art, extended in what looked like blessing. The final panel made me sit down hard on the cave floor. It showed the horned figure standing guard while humans slept safely in crude shelters. Protection, not predation. A bargain struck and kept. I photographed everything, multiple angles, different lighting. The university's anthropology department would want to see this. Hell, this could rewrite understanding of pre-Columbian mountain cultures. But even as I documented, I knew I'd be careful about what I shared. Some knowledge carried responsibility. The hike back was harder, my mind churning through implications. The creature, guardian, spirit, whatever it was, hadn't always been humanity's enemy. The pictographs suggested coexistence, even reverence. So what changed? When did the offerings stop? When did worship become fear? That evening I sat on my porch despite the cold, nursing a beer and watching darkness creep across the valley. The feeling of being watched was stronger than usual, but not hostile. More like attention, evaluation. The family left safely, I said to the darkness, feeling only slightly ridiculous. They showed proper respect. Wind rose from nowhere, rattling my windows hard enough to make the frames groan. Then, as suddenly as it came, It died to perfect stillness. The old agreements, I continued, because I was already talking to the night like a crazy person. I want to understand them, not to break them, but to honor them better. Nothing. Just stars and cold and the distant sound of an owl. I went inside, locked up with my usual paranoia, and tried to sleep, but my mind kept returning to those cave paintings, humans and monster in partnership, not opposition. Morning came gray and damp, clouds sitting low on the peaks. I made coffee and stepped out to check the weather when I saw it. A single line carved into my porch railing. Not 3 lines like a warning or claim. Just one, clean and deliberate, right where I usually stood to watch the sunrise. I ran my finger along the groove. The edges were sharp, fresh, but the wood inside had already weathered like the mark had been there for years. Acknowledgement. That's what it felt like. Not approval exactly, but recognition. Like the mountain itself had nodded in my direction. I went inside and pulled out the laminated rule cards, the ones I'd perfected over 5 years. 6 rules that had kept people mostly safe. But now I added a 7th, printing it on the same cardstock, laminating it with the same care. 7. If you must leave suddenly, thank the mountain for its hospitality. Such a simple thing, but the Ortiz family had done it instinctively. That respect, that acknowledgement of being guests on ancient land. Maybe that was the real agreement. Not fear, but recognition. Not submission, but respect. My phone rang, a cheerful voice asking about availability for next week. The Hendersons, party of 6, including 4 children. I confirmed their reservation, already mentally preparing for the conversation about rules, about respect, about things that knocked in the night. After hanging up, I looked toward the peaks where snow still clung despite the warm spell. Somewhere up there, in caves and forests that had never known a surveyor's mark, something ancient kept watch. It had been here when the Ute people first arrived, had watched Spanish explorers, had seen miners and settlers and tourists come and go like seasons. We were temporary, all of us. Our cabins and roads and cell towers were just the latest page in a story that started before human memory and would continue long after we were gone. The creature knew this, had always known it. The rules weren't perfect. They were just the best translation my family had managed between 2 worlds that barely touched. But they were something. A framework for coexistence. A way to share space with something that had prior claim. I filed the new cards with the others, ready for the next family who'd laugh at some rules and follow others and probably never know how close they came to something impossible. If they were lucky, they'd leave with photos and memories and stories about mountain weather. If they weren't lucky, well, that's what the rules were for. The single line on my porch railing caught the afternoon light, throwing a shadow that looked almost like writing. But that was probably just my imagination. Probably.